tree. So, hello everyone. My name's Dr. Henry Sidsaph. I'm a researcher, and I've spent the last 5 years trying to understand networks. That really is my passion, and they've been grounded in sustainability, really. So, when we think of networks, they're not really that difficult to understand. In basic terms, we can see a network is just two things that are tied together in a relationship. And one example I like to give is of two friends in a class. They're best friends, but they may be part of a cluster of 5 or 6 close friends within a class of 30, for example, and then they're made up of the larger school, which is of a few hundred. And then you could look at what ties those children together. It could be a football team, or a favorite teacher, or a family relationship. So I'm going to start my talk with Star Wars and looking at the interconnections, the relationships between characters. There's a fantastic piece of research from a lady called Gabasova, and she looked at the screen time connections between characters in the first 6 movies. And pretty much Star Wars is based on Darth Vader's life. It goes from Anakin Skywalker into Darth Vader, and then it's really about his life, and Luke gets involved as well. But when we look at the connections, the screen time connections between people on the movies, we can see that Obi-Wan Kenobi is the key actor in that network. He plays a really important social function. But the thing to remember is that he's not the key actor. It's not his story, but he's very knowledgeable. He's a Jedi Master. And he's able to place himself really well. Each line, for example, is a conversation between 2 characters. And then you can see the names there. So, slightly less easy to understand graph. This is some research I conducted as part of my PhD thesis. So I examined alternative food networks and tried to understand what makes these small, usually locally focused companies who have a core common movement value of sustainability that ties them together. What makes them special? What makes them unique? And I looked at online connections and offline connections. So each blue line is a connection between a food and drink company. So this is from growers, rearers, producers, manufacturers, and then retailers like farm shops, delis, restaurants. So everyone in that whole supply chain of food. And it looks quite busy. It looks like there's quite a lot going on. The different colours denote a different type of food company. But really, the thing that I found is that these networks were really underutilised. They weren't talking to each other. They weren't championing their supply chain. And really, they were missing a trick. However, when we see certain individual companies, some of them were actually punching way above their weight in terms of connectivity. Here's an example of a company on the left where they were talking about what was important to them, online and offline. You go to the restaurant, for example, and you'll see their whole supply chain listed on their menus, and they were really championing what made them unique and special. Now, not every company was like this, and for me, I just couldn't help but think that this is a perfect network of people and companies who know so much about what's important to them, but they're just not sharing everything. So why did I choose to study food companies for 3 years and looking at the connections between them? Well, a few years ago, I was over in southeast Spain, in Andalusia, and I was examining olive oil production. So in my very bad Spanish, I'd go and interview some farmers and ask them what was important to them. And there's 2 main types of olive production. You've got the conventional, which is what you probably see here, where you get a monoculture of crops, where you get one type of tree, clear everything out of the land, and then what's left is basically an artificial environment. You need lots of liquid nitrogen fertilizer to maintain the soil fertility, and it needs lots of water. And I don't need to tell you, but in a semi-arid environment, water is a big concern. So there's a fantastic guy who, a couple of generations being a farmer, an olive farmer in Spain, Rafael, and he chose to grow his olives in a traditional manner by favouring organic production. And as we can see here, You can see a wildflower meadow is below. The soil fertility is maintained. I think they use goats and things like that to trim back the vegetation they don't like anymore. And you get a high-quality product, and it's environmentally sound. You get a fair price for that because it's marketed just like wine is, and the people are employed locally to help with that. So in terms of networks, what Raphael did was reach out to the smallholder farmers who were in the local area and said to them, don't grow in this intensive production method, because the more inputs you put into your business model, when it becomes less economically viable, just stop renting the land, or the smallholder farmers wouldn't continue to farm. So he championed organic production with his network. And there was nothing special about Raphael's olives. There was nothing special about his position in the community. But what he had is that clear vision to make what was important to him resonate in his community. And the environment's better off for it. And as I said, the people, planet, and profit, that whole sustainability of a business, it really does ring true when you see what's produced there. I think it looks better as well. So, Acorns. When I was conducting the research on the alternative food networks, I was putting all the data together, and I was looking at what made these companies special and unique. And it really was that they really enjoyed the environmental stewardship and the social consciousness of their activities. But a lot of them weren't actually practicing what they preached. And then it made me think about my own motives. And as someone who is a sustainability advocate, I questioned what I was doing. I'd recycle a little bit and take fewer journeys in the car, but really wasn't doing all that much. And at this time, I remembered watching a video from Professor Carl Sagan, which is one of my heroes, and he said, when you want something to be true, and when you want something to go a certain way, I want to believe something, that's when you need to reach in for added reserves of skepticism, or you're likely to be fooled. So upon critically reflecting on what it was that I was doing, I was fooling myself. I wasn't quite doing enough in terms of sustainability or practicing what I preach. So I think it was October or September time, went to Ewlow Forest, which is just in North Wales, collected a bunch of acorns, brought them home, and a couple of months later, I had this on my window. And I thought this was fantastic. I had lots of little acorns turning into saplings. I thought it was great, but my girlfriend at the time was less sympathetic because the windowsills were all cluttered with trees, and she was kind of like that woman from the Heineken advert where she shares her life with chairs. She's got chairs all over everywhere. So I had to get rid of these. So I'd go to events and I'd bring along a sapling with me and give them to people, and people would look at me kind of funny and say, are you well, are you okay, and do you need help, and things like that. But inadvertently, what it was that I was doing is positioning myself as a key actor in my social network with something that was important to me. Now, I'm no expert on trees. I know you can put an acorn seed in soil, give it some water and time, and it will grow. So I'm not an authority on that. I know sustainability, but I'm no forest manager. I'm not the key person in my own network. I think there's a lot of people who don't even consider me as part of their network. But with this one issue, I thought it was important to really expand that and try and create some net positive contributions. Now, the thing about creating a tree, an oak tree, is that it is that net positive contribution. It's long-term. It's really constructive and simple and easy to do, but you can affect a lot of people, and you can get your message out to a considerably large number of people if it's something that that's important to you. I went along to a couple of schools and gave some talks. I was able to plant some of these out along hedgerows. In the evenings, I'd go along and just plant one out without people knowing, but they're still there. And the local authority has taken some trees off me now as well. But in terms of my network connection with other people, what I found is that months later, I've had conversations about the trees that I've given them. I've seen some of them that have been planted out. And one of my best friends, Tom, he's actually taken this and he is by far surpassed the amount of tree planting than I have done, and that's only been in a couple of years. So in terms of having that legacy and having that reach, already with just a small number of people, actually had quite a big impact. And unless people chop them down, you've got to plant them in the right place. I feel that they can have that long-term benefit there. So the so what from all this talk really is that just like Obi-Wan Kenobi being in the Star Wars franchise, he's a cool guy. He's very civilized, but it's not his story. The alternative food networks, we had the examples of a couple of companies that were doing really good, but they weren't the people who were producing the best produce in their area or stocking the best award-winning produce. And then with Raphael and his olives, he wasn't the key person there, but he was able to impact quite a lot in his area. And then me with my trees, I would like to think that I'm at the beginning of that journey of having that impact. So my ask for you as an audience watching is that if there's something that's really important to you and something that you're passionate about, it doesn't have to be about the environment, it could be anything. But use this time that you've got now to get your message across and make yourself the key actor in your own network and get your message out there. So thank you very much, everybody.